Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today, actually it was a case that remained unsolved for 44 years, but thanks to DNA testing and our improvements in that field, it allowed it to be solved, which is just amazing how much technology improves, and it allows cold cases like these to give their family the answers that they have wanted for so many years. It is the case of Arlis Perry, and it was only solved in 2018, so 3 years ago, not even that long ago really. This case was suggested by Anna, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and if you have any more, please do let me know. Arlis K. Perry was actually born Arlis K. Deekemer, I apologise if I've said that wrong, on the 22nd of February in 1955 to mother Jean and father Marvin. She was born in Linton, North Dakota, and was actually raised in Bismarck. She also had 2 other siblings. Now, her parents ran an automotive company, and they were also a very religious family, and so they spent a lot of time at church and things like that. And they raised their children, all of their children, as devout Christians. And it is something that Arlis would continue throughout her entire life. You know, she remained a devout Christian. Arlis went to high school, and this is where she actually met her childhood sweetheart, Bruce D. Perry. And they began dating. Arlis was a cheerleader, he was really into sports, and they clicked, and they absolutely loved spending time with each other. And so they did begin to date. In 1973, Arlis and Bruce both graduated high school, and Bruce went on to go to the Stanford University, and he moved into the campus there. He began studying pre-med, and obviously Arlis was not with him, so they would maintain a long-distance relationship for a while. And as you can imagine, those kinds of things now would be a lot easier with the technology we have now, but this was in the 70s. They didn't have, I don't know, FaceTime or anything like that, Skype. And so it would have been difficult, but they really loved each other, and so they made it work. Bruce was still attending classes when he decided that he was going to propose to Arlis. She accepted, and then on the 17th of August in 1974, they go to that local church that they attended all the time, Bismarck Community Church, and that is where they got married. Arlis would then move down to the Stanford Community campus so that she could be with her newlywed husband. He was a sophomore doing his pre-med course, and obviously she needed a job, so she goes down there. She actually does manage to get a job. She gets a job as a receptionist in a law firm. Before she actually got this job though, she was feeling very lonely because obviously she's left everyone that she knew behind. Yes, okay, she moved there to be with Bruce, who she absolutely loved, but you've got to think that he was doing a pre-med course. He was busy a lot of the time studying, and they didn't get to spend a lot of time together, unfortunately, so she felt really lonely and I guess isolated. But then when she got this job, things really did improve. She began socializing, you know, with her work colleagues. She started to make a few friends at work, so it just made her feel less lonely. So Arlis at this time was 19 years old, and we get to the 12th of October in 1974, and she is going to go and post some letters, and Bruce decides that he's going to go with her just to make sure that everything goes okay, that she stays safe, things like that. They'd only been married a couple of months at this point, and so everything was new, and they were still sort of settling in with each other. Obviously, they'd known each other quite a while, but getting married to someone and sort of moving in and living with them, it can be so difficult. And obviously, people have arguments. People have arguments all the time anyway. And that is unfortunately what they ended up doing. They were walking to post these letters or something along those lines, and then they began arguing about tire pressure in their car. I don't know about who did it or whether there was too much, too little. I don't know the ins and outs of it fully, but that is what the argument was about. After this argument, she told Bruce that she was going to go to the church because she wanted to pray alone. She wanted some space and she needed a break. So it was about 11:30 at night, and the church wasn't that far away from where they lived, so he left her to it. You know, she needed some time alone, and he didn't really have much of a choice but to let her go. So that is what he did. She headed to the church, he headed back to the apartment, and he was just going to wait for her there once she'd finished her prayers and things, you know, they could sort of sort this out. She needed time to calm down, and probably so did he, and then they would just chat later. It got to 3 a.m. and Arlis didn't come home, which Bruce thought was very strange because she hadn't lived there very long. She hadn't really made long-lasting friends. Yes, okay, she had got a couple of friends in work, but to the point where some people class work colleagues as different, especially if you've not been there very long. You know, they're not people necessarily that you'd go out with or spend time with as much, especially when you've only just met them, kind of thing. She hadn't made long-lasting relationships like that to warrant her to still be out at this time. Like, if she, you know, had a really good friend that she could go over to their house and stay with, that's different, because she needed to cool off, and maybe that's what she did. But Arlis didn't really have anyone like that yet, and so he got worried. He actually ended up calling the police. He reported her as missing, and the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office came around. They decide to go to the church, because obviously that's where she said she was going to go. So they go around there, they check around there, but the doors are all locked and there's no activity or anything inside. Then the police receive a disturbing call just a couple of hours later at 5:45 a.m. on the 13th. They receive a call from a security guard campus person, I think, called Stephen Crawford, and he calls up to say that he has found a body in the church by the altar. This body was naked. She was face up with her arms sort of folded against her chest. The jeans that she had been wearing had been put across her in like a diamond shape. She had a candlestick pushed up in between her breasts, and she had clearly been murdered. They found she'd been murdered with an ice pick to the head, which was still there, and the handle was actually broke off, and that was nowhere to be seen. There were signs that this woman had been strangled, and obviously the cause of death was the head wound, the head injury. I'm not going to go into too many details of it because what happened to her was disgusting. So if you want to look that up, you can do. I'm not getting into it. Let's just say that she was sexually assaulted too, and leave it at that. And if you want to look into it more, then please do so. So Stephen, the person that found her, the security guard, apparently he used to be an ex-police officer at one point, but he was now a security guard. And he said that he remembered seeing Arlis going into the church at 11:45, which was also corroborated by 2 other witnesses. He told them that he would be locking up the church very shortly. You know, they didn't have that much time before he would close everything down. So basically just a warning. And the other 2 people left at 12 p.m. and said that when they left, Arlis was still praying. Stephen got there just after 12 himself. Obviously he was planning on locking up. So he gets there. He says that there didn't seem to be anybody inside, and so he just locked up, and then he left again. He returned at around 2 a.m. Everything was quiet. The doors were still all locked. Nothing suspicious was going on, and so he left again. And then he returned once more at 5:45. He was going to actually open up the church again at this time, and this is when he noticed that one of the doors on the west side of the church was actually open. So obviously police go in and they do a forensic examination of the area. It was determined that this body was unfortunately that of Arlis Perry. She had been murdered at the age of just 19 years old. Now, the police go in, they do a forensic examination, and they did uncover DNA at the scene. They found semen on a kneeling pillow near to her body, and they also found this palm print on a candle. A candlestick, I think. Or it might have actually been a candle, I'm not sure. The door in the church that was actually found open had been forced from the inside to open it. So whoever was in there, if say the security guard locked the door from the outside, they forced it open from the inside. So they must have already been in there, kind of thing. So police went to go and speak to Bruce. Now initially they did not tell him about Arlis. They wanted to gauge his reaction and, I don't know, just try and get a feel of whether he was innocent or guilty of this crime. So they took him in, they questioned him for hours, and he completely cooperated with the police. He gave fingerprints, he took a polygraph, he was so helpful and cooperative and very worried about his wife, and the police did rule him out as a suspect. This is when they did inform him that they had found Arlis's body and that she was in fact deceased and had been murdered. And Bruce reacted like any other loving husband was. He was devastated, he was shocked, honestly just inconsolable, which is what the police not wanted to see. Obviously nobody wants to see somebody devastated, but it meant that it sort of reaffirmed the thoughts on it that he wasn't involved, just the way he reacted to it. Police began working the case. They looked into everything they could. They interviewed anyone that was around. There was an estimated 7 people to be thought to be in that church around the same time. They managed to find 6 of them, but they couldn't find the 7th. This 7th person was described by a passerby as this around 5'10" man with sandy blonde hair, well, sandy coloured hair of medium build, was entering the church around just after 12, which is when this passerby spotted them, had noticed that they were there. Another witness also came forward, said that they heard a strange noise coming from the church at around 12:30 p.m. But then after that, everything went silent. They didn't hear anything else, and so they just left. Police obviously questioned Stephen. He was the one who found her body, and they questioned him with regards to everything. Apparently they took his palm print and it didn't match the one on the candlestick. He also did a polygraph test as well. So they're just looking into all these aspects and just working the case as best they could. Then it comes to Arlis's funeral. Now, a co-worker that obviously worked with her ended up being introduced to her husband Bruce, who she'd never met before. Bruce hadn't gone down to her work before. She'd not been there very long, so it wasn't really strange that he hadn't. So they didn't know who he was. They'd not been introduced. And so when they were, she was actually quite shocked because she saw Arlis speaking with a man in his 20s. They were arguing a couple of days before she was actually murdered. And she just assumed that this was Bruce. So that when she was met face to face with Bruce, she was actually quite surprised because she honestly thought that this guy was him. But from what I could find, I don't believe they ever found out who this guy was, or the person entering the church. They didn't know who this was. Nobody ever came forward at the time, and they couldn't figure it out. Years passed by. They did question Stephen a few times. They had a few other suspects who they questioned, but nothing really went anywhere. The leads that they had just ended up like dead ends, and unfortunately her case would run cold for many years, but they never ever closed it. They kept looking into it and kept going over it. They didn't just close it down and sort of never look at it again. Obviously, over the years, people theorized as to what had happened to her because this case was a cold case for 40 odd years, and there were theories behind ritualistic killings. There was theories behind the son of Sam killer. Now, I have actually mentioned this theory before in a video I did around Halloween. It was a video of Ronald Seisman and Elizabeth Platzman. Now, the son of Sam killer, if you haven't watched that video, it's not actually known whether this exists or not. I just found it really interesting that I'd done a case that mentioned it then in Halloween, and then now I'm looking into this one and it's mentioned again. I just found it so strange. It's all related to killer David Berkowitz, which I probably will do a video on in one day. I think I said that in my last video too, but I haven't yet. And apparently he sent some messages forward or something to say that she had died as a result of a satanic cult. Obviously, we know that is not the truth because this case is now solved. But I just found it super interesting because I've come across this before. And I wonder whether I will keep coming across this. I just found it so strange how it just tied in. It's weird. Something I actually didn't mention as well was when Stephen Crawford found the body, apparently he rang the police and said, "We've got a stiff here." So yeah, that is how he described her, which I think is so awful. Arlis Perry was a person. She had been brutally murdered, and the way he described her, like, I just thought it was so disrespectful and so awful. Anyway, for years nobody really knew who killed her. Her family wanted answers and they unfortunately didn't get any. That was until 2018. Police redid some DNA testing, you know, with the improved technology, and they came back with a match. That match was none other than Stephen Blake Crawford. He was actually 72 years old at the time, and obviously with this DNA evidence now tying him into her murder, they gained a search warrant for his house and an arrest warrant, and so they go around to try and get this man. They knock on his door and Stephen asks if he can have a few minutes to get ready. They didn't actually need him to open the door because they had a key, I believe, from the landlord or something like that. So they let themselves in, and this is when they walk into his bedroom and he is laid on the bed with a gun. Now I presume Stephen has lived his life with the thought that possibly this could always happen in the back of his mind, because it seems like he was ready for when it did. So he has the gun. The police obviously, you know, they're worried. They think that he's going to try and shoot them, so they back out of the bedroom and then they hear a shot. They go back into the bedroom and he had actually shot himself. Yeah, okay, this case is now treated as solved because that was the only DNA they found. Stephen was the one that found her body, was the one that, you know, was last known to be around that area. Everything was a bit suspicious, but they just didn't have any evidence to tie him into it because the DNA wasn't very good then. But now it was, and it tied him in. So obviously, her case is now being treated as solved. They believe that it essentially died with him because he was the one that killed her. So after 44 years, Stephen was finally identified as the killer of Arlis Perry. Now, obviously, the sad aspect of this is that he didn't serve any jail time or anything like that. Some people may think that him no longer being here is justice enough. Obviously, if you think that, then that's up to you. Personally, I would rather see people in jail serving time for what they did. I don't know. But you never got any of that. I guess you could say that it was justice that he's no longer here. Again, that's your decision to make, whether you think that's justice enough or not. But at least her family finally found out what happened to her. Finally found out who killed their 19-year-old little girl. And I just want to say there's a lot more information on this case. There's a lot more into the theories, and you can go really in depth with them, especially with the son of Sam's killer kind of thing route, if you wanted to go down that one. Obviously, we now know that it's not the case, that Stephen was the murderer, but, you know, you might find that really interesting to look into. With it being unsolved for so many years, people had lots of theories and thoughts on the case. So again, if you want to look into them, you can do, but obviously I'm not going to put them in this video because they were theories and they were proved to not be true. So yeah, I'm just glad that they finally did catch him, that he did not get, I mean, he got away with it for 44 years, but he didn't get away with it forever kind of thing until his natural death. And her family could finally make peace with it. Well, not make peace with it, but just find out who did this to their kid. With everything against him, I truly believe that Stephen was the killer, like the police do. Obviously, it could still be possible that he wasn't, but I really don't think that, because if the semen was a DNA match to him, then why would that be in there if it wasn't him? And then he took his own life. As soon as the police knocked on his door, he took his own life. So that, to me at least, pretty much solidifies that he did this. But yeah, that's the end of the case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Arlis Perry. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.